Chapter 1. The Woman Who Wouldn't Leave. The carriage wheels groaned as they climbed the winding drive toward Ashbourne Manor, slicing through the mist that blanketed the moors like a living thing. Lady Katrina Hale pressed her gloved hands together, her heart thrumming faster with every turn. Somewhere beyond the fog, the Duke of Ravenshire waited, though from all accounts he did not wait for anyone willingly. Rain beaded against the glass, a soft, steady tapping that filled the silence inside the coach. Her small trunk rattled on the seat beside her, the meager sum of all she possessed in the world. Once her life had been filled with laughter, friends, and the glittering balls of London, but that was before her father's debts, before scandal, before she learned how quickly society's favor could turn to contempt. Now she was to serve as a companion, a role she neither desired nor entirely understood, to the Duke's younger sister, Lady Cecily Vale. The coachman's shout broke her reverie. "Nearly there, miss." Katrina leaned forward, eyes straining through the fog. The outline of the manor emerged at last, vast, shadowed, and utterly formidable. Ashbourne was no gentle country estate. It stood like a fortress upon the hill, its dark stone walls gleaming with rain, every turret and chimney cutting into the low grey clouds. A shiver traced her spine. So this was the Duke's domain. When the coach halted before the great oak doors, Katrina gathered her courage and her skirts and stepped down into the chill. The rain kissed her face with icy precision. Two footmen, silent and austere in livery, appeared to take her luggage. Before she could thank them, the massive doors opened. Lady Cecily stood there, a vision of warmth and colour in contrast to the bleak stone behind her. "Oh, you poor thing. You're soaked," she exclaimed, hurrying forward. "Come in quickly. I'd no idea my brother would have you travel in such dreadful weather." Katrina smiled faintly, already liking her. "I am quite all right, my lady. The rain has never frightened me." "Then you are braver than most who come to Ashbourne," Cecily said with a knowing smile, looping her arm through Katrina's. "And please, call me Cecily. I've long grown tired of being my lady to everyone under this roof." The warmth of the manor enveloped her at once. The scent of wood smoke, old books, and something faintly wild, like heather and the moor itself. A grand staircase rose before them, lit by the flicker of candles in brass sconces. The place was beautiful in a solemn way, its grandeur dimmed by years of neglect. Portraits lined the walls, proud men and graceful women, all with the same strong jaw and piercing grey eyes. Katrina's gaze lingered on one in particular, a tall man in a military uniform, his eyes so alive she almost felt them watching her. "That's him, isn't it?" she whispered. Cecily followed her gaze. "My brother, Tristan Vale, Duke of Ravenshire. The painting was done before the war." Her voice softened. "Before everything changed." Katrina turned. "And he is home now?" Cecily hesitated. "Home, yes, but not quite back. You'll see soon enough." It was not long before soon enough arrived. Dinner was a quiet affair in the east drawing room. Only Cecily, Katrina, and the housekeeper were present when the door opened without warning. He entered like a shadow that swallowed the light. The Duke of Ravenshire, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably commanding, even in silence. His dark hair, once golden by rumour, was now streaked with the faint silver of sleepless years. A thin scar curved down his left cheek, stopping just shy of his mouth. a reminder of the wars that had nearly taken his life. Katrina felt her breath catch. The air shifted, the room tightening around him. Cecily rose at once. "Tristan, you should have sent word. We'd have waited supper." He waved a dismissive hand. "Do not trouble yourself on my account." His voice was low, rough-edged, like gravel over steel. Then his eyes landed on Katrina. "And who, precisely, is this?" Cecily brightened. "This is Lady Katrina Hale, the companion I wrote to you about. She has come to assist me while I recall no such arrangement being approved." He cut in coldly. "Nor do I recall asking for a stranger to reside in my house." Catriona, though startled, drew herself up. "Your Grace, your sister believed—" He lifted a hand sharply. "My sister believes in many things she should not." His gaze swept over her, not lasciviously, but as one might assess a soldier's worth. "I prefer to know who walks my halls, Lady Hale. This estate is not a charity." Katrina met his eyes then, grey meeting green, and to her own surprise she did not flinch. "And yet I have no wish for charity, Your Grace, only honest employment." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Even Cecily seemed uncertain whether to breathe. Then finally he said, "You may remain until the week's end. After that, my steward will see you escorted wherever you choose to go." Cecily began to protest, but Katrina's quiet voice interrupted. "Very well, Your Grace, a week it shall be." Something flickered across his face. Not quite approval, not yet curiosity, before he turned away. "Then I wish you both good evening." And just like that, he was gone. Later, when Cecily retired, Katrina wandered alone through the dimly lit corridors. The manor seemed to breathe around her, the creak of wood, the whisper of old air through high windows. Every portrait, every relic spoke of lives long gone, and yet one presence dominated them all, the Duke himself. She paused by a set of double doors slightly ajar. A faint light flickered within. Against her better judgment, she peered inside. The Duke sat before the fire, a half-empty glass in his hand, his posture rigid, his eyes lost somewhere far beyond the flames. The faint tremor of his hand as he refilled the glass betrayed him, not in weakness, but in weariness so profound it seemed carved into his soul. Katrina stepped back, unseen. She should have left, but the sight of him, proud and broken all at once, rooted her to the spot. "Lady Hale," his voice came, startling her. "Do you make a habit of spying upon your employer?" She froze. Your Grace, forgive me. I did not mean to linger outside a closed room, or did not mean to be caught." His words stung, but his tone was weary, not cruel. "I only wished to ensure you were well," she said quietly. "You seemed troubled." He turned then, his expression unreadable. "You presume much for one who's been here scarcely a day. And you presume much of me, Your Grace, when you assume I'm easily frightened." For a moment, the ghost of a smile, bitter, fleeting, touched his lips. "Indeed, it seems I may have misjudged you." Their eyes held, a silent clash between frost and fire, until at last he looked away. "Go to bed, Lady Hale. You will find this house less welcoming the longer you stay." She curtsied, though her pulse thundered. "Then I shall endeavor to make it more so." When she was gone, he let out a breath. he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Tristan Vale, Duke of Ravenshire, stared into the fire, her words echoing in his mind. She will not last a week, he told himself, and yet as the wind howled against the windows and the embers burned low, he could not sleep. For the first time in years, it was not the ghosts of war that kept him awake, but the memory of a woman's defiant eyes in the candlelight. Chapter 2. Ghosts of War and Memory. Long after the servants had retired and the fires had burned low, the Duke of Ravenshire still sat in his study, staring into the dying embers. The manor was silent save for the distant ticking of the clock in the hall, a metronome marking the empty hours of his sleepless life. He had lived through the roar of cannon fire, the cries of men dying in the mud, and the merciless quiet that followed victory. But there was something about the silence of Ashbourne that unsettled him more deeply than any battlefield. Because here there was no one left to command, no one to save, only ghosts. His eyes drifted toward the piano in the far corner, draped in dust and neglect. Once that piano had filled the house with laughter, his mother's hands, his sister's bright voice, and her, Eliza. He closed his eyes. Even the name still hurt. He saw her again, not as she was now, married to another, but as she had been that day in London, her white gown fluttering in the breeze as she told him she could not wait for a man who might never return. She had wept as she said it, but the tears had not softened the blow. He had gone to war believing himself unbreakable. He had returned knowing he was not. Tristan reached for the glass on the table, his fourth of the evening, and drained it without thought. The fire snapped once, throwing a sudden light against the walls. For an instant, it seemed to dance upon another's shadow, slender, feminine, the faint trace of perfume that did not belong to the past. He turned his head sharply. Nothing, only the echo of memory. Morning broke grey and brittle over the moors. Mist rolled over the grass like smoke from a dying fire. In the courtyard below, Katrina Hale stood with a basket of letters in hand, her cloak wrapped tightly against the cold. She had not slept much either. The memory of his eyes, cold, cutting, but undeniably alive, lingered in her mind. There had been something in them that reminded her of herself, a soul that had seen too much and trusted too little. The housekeeper, Mrs. Linton, bustled past her with a disapproving look. "You'd do best to keep clear of his grace in the mornings, miss," she muttered. "He's not one for company before noon." "I've gathered as much," Katrina replied mildly. "But Lady Cecily's letters cannot deliver themselves." Mrs. Linton pursed her lips. "Aye, and if he catches you wandering into his study again, you'll find yourself back on the road to London before the week's end." Katrina's smile was faint. "Then I suppose I shall have to be very quick." The Duke's study door stood ajar, a single beam of light spilling across the corridor. She knocked once, twice. "Enter," came his voice, clipped, measured, unmistakably tired. She stepped inside, her presence like a whisper in the vast room. He was at his desk, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled, a sight that startled her more than she cared to admit. Papers were scattered before him, maps and old military dispatches covered in notes and corrections. His hands, long-fingered and scarred, rested upon a letter half-finished. "Good morning, Your Grace," she began softly. "Lady Cecily asked me to deliver the post." his pen stilled. "I trust you are aware that servants usually perform that duty." "I am aware," she said evenly, "but your sister was unwell this morning, and I volunteered." His gaze flicked up then, sharp, assessing. "Volunteered? How very diligent of you." She took a step closer. "Only kind, Your Grace. It costs little to be so." He regarded her for a moment that stretched too long to be polite. Finally he nodded toward the table. "Leave them there." She obeyed, but as she turned to go, his voice stopped her. "Lady Hale," she froze, half-turned. "Yes, Your Grace." He gestured to the open window. "Does it not strike you as peculiar that a woman of your upbringing seeks employment here of all places? Ashbourne is hardly fashionable." Catriona hesitated. "Fashionable places rarely tolerate those who have fallen from grace." His brow lifted, intrigued despite himself. "Fallen? My father died a debtor," she said simply. "Our family name was whispered about in drawing rooms more than once. I thought it best to seek peace somewhere whispers do not reach." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "And you imagine you'll find peace here?" "I imagine I shall find honesty here," she replied, "even if it is cold." The faintest twitch ghosted across his lips. Not quite amusement, not yet warmth. "You speak boldly for a companion." "Perhaps," she said, turning toward the door, "but boldness is often mistaken for survival, Your Grace." And then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Tristan exhaled slowly, his hand tightening around the quill until a drop of ink bled onto the page. Boldness mistaken for survival. The words struck something deep within him. For years he had survived, but he had forgotten what it meant to live. Days passed, each one tugging the household into a rhythm it had long forgotten. Cecily adored her new companion. Laughter began to return to the breakfast table, soft and hesitant like spring after a long winter. Even the servants seemed to walk lighter, as though Catriona's gentle energy had warmed the stone walls themselves. All, of course, except for the Duke. He remained distant, his interactions with her clipped and infrequent. Yet she could feel his presence, even when he was not in the room. Sometimes, when she looked up from her embroidery in the library, she would find him standing by the doorway, silent, unreadable, watching, and when their eyes met, neither looked away first. One evening, she found herself in the music room, dusting the old piano. She pressed one tentative key, and the sound, though off tune, echoed sweetly through the air. She smiled and began to play, the melody uncertain at first, then surer, brighter. It was an old Scottish lullaby her mother had sung to her as a child, full of longing and memory. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached the final notes. A quiet voice behind her said, "You play beautifully." She startled, turning. He was there, half-shadowed by the doorway. "I beg your pardon," she said, rising quickly. "I didn't mean to disturb you, Your Grace." He shook his head. "You didn't." He stepped inside, the firelight catching the scar along his cheek. "That song, I've not heard it since the war." Her breath caught. "You knew it?" He nodded slowly. "One of my men, a Scotsman from the north, used to play it by the campfire, said it reminded him of home. I suppose it reminded us all." There was something in his tone, a quiet ache that words could not mend. Katrina hesitated, then spoke softly. "You lost many men, didn't you?" He looked away. "Too many." She wanted to ask more, to reach into that silence and pull him back from it. but his expression made her stop. Instead, she said gently, "Then I am sorry for your loss, Your Grace." He gave a hollow laugh. "Loss? It's too small a word for what war takes." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them not heavy but strangely alive, fragile, human. Then, as if suddenly aware of himself, he drew back. "It's late. You should rest." She nodded. "Good night, Your Grace." "Good night," he said quietly, but long after she was gone he remained in the doorway, the echo of her song still lingering in the air, and for the first time in years the ghosts did not feel quite so loud. That night when Katrina blew out her candle and lay awake in her narrow bed, she thought of him, not the Duke, but the man beneath that title, the soldier, the brother, the heart once betrayed. And in the dark, she whispered to herself what she could never say aloud. "He ordered me to leave, but I don't think he truly wants me gone." Chapter 3. A Bargain. Beneath the storm, spring had come to the moors in name only. The air was sharp, the wind impatient, and clouds clung to the horizon, as though unwilling to move on. Ashbourne Manor seemed alive with its own unease, the echo of hurried footsteps in corridors, the whisper of voices behind closed doors, the unspoken tension between its master and his sister's companion. Lady Katrina Hale had not left at the week's end as ordered. The Duke of Ravenshire had not reminded her. Instead, they orbited each other in the uneasy rhythm of people who should have remained strangers but could not quite manage to be. One afternoon, a carriage arrived from London. Its appearance broke the monotony like thunder in clear skies. Cecily was in the parlour when the butler entered, stiff as a church pillar. "A visitor, my lady, Lord Halston." Katrina glanced up from her stitching, recognizing the name immediately. Lord Halston, the Duke's cousin, a man known more for charm than for honour. Moments later, he swept into the room, his smile polished, his coat gleaming with rain. "Dearest Cecily," he exclaimed, bowing low, "and this must be the famous Miss Hale I've heard whispers about. My cousin's household has grown far more interesting of late." Cecily frowned. "Whispers? What whispers?" Halston's grin widened. "Oh, the usual, that your brother has taken in a mysterious lady companion, young and far too pretty to be harmless." Katrina's needle stilled. "If gossip amuses you, my lord, perhaps you should apply for a post at the local paper." Cecily choked on a laugh. Halston's eyes glinted with mischief. "Touché, my lady, but I wonder, has my cousin seen what a perilous creature he's housed beneath his roof?" Before Katrina could answer, the door opened again, and there he was. The Duke stood framed by the stormlight from the hall, his expression unreadable but his presence commanding. "Halston," he said coolly, "I was wondering what sin I'd committed to deserve this visit." Halston rose from his chair with a mocking bow. "You wound me, cousin. I came to bring news, and perhaps a touch of civilization to these gloomy halls." Tristan's eyes flicked to Katrina, who stood quietly by the window. "You'll find both in short supply here." Cecily stepped forward quickly, ever the peacemaker. "Tristan, please. He's only come for supper." "Then he may have it," the Duke replied curtly. "But he'll dine as a guest, not a gossip." Halston smirked, glancing again at Katrina. "And yet there's so much worth gossiping about." The Duke's gaze turned to ice. "Enough. The silence that followed was heavy as thunder. Cecily looked between them helplessly. Holston only chuckled. "Very well, cousin, I see the rumor is true. You've gone soft for the first time in years." Katrina felt her cheeks burn. She started to protest, but the Duke's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Get out!" Holston blinked. "What?" "I said get out," Tristan repeated, his tone dangerously calm. "You will not speak that way in my house or to my guests." For a moment no one breathed. Then Holston laughed softly, raised his hands in mock surrender, and strode from the room. "So be it. But remember this, cousin. When pride blinds you, love will break you." The door closed behind him. Thunder rolled over the hills. Cecily murmured an excuse and fled, leaving them alone. Rain lashed against the windows, and the silence between them felt alive. Katrina turned to him at last. "You shouldn't have done that. I should have thrown him out sooner," he said. "He's your cousin," she reminded gently. "Family." His jaw clenched. "Family has done me more harm than any enemy." Her eyes softened. "Then perhaps you've only known the wrong kind." He met her gaze, and for once did not look away. "You shouldn't listen to him." "I don't. He meant to humiliate you." "I know, but I'm not humiliated." Something flickered in his expression, admiration or perhaps disbelief. "Why not?" "Because I've nothing left to lose," she said quietly. "You cannot humiliate someone who has already been cast aside." For the first time, the Duke's composure faltered. He looked at her as though truly seeing her, not as an intruder or obligation, but as a woman marked by her own battles. "You speak as if you know pain," he said. She gave a sad smile. "Don't we all?" That night the storm came. Rain battered the manor with furious hands, the wind howling like a living thing across the moor. Servants rushed to shutter windows and bar doors, but still the cold seeped in, curling beneath the tapestries. Katrina was in her chamber when a sharp knock startled her. "Lady Hale," came the Duke's voice. She opened the door to find him standing there, his coat damp from the rain, a candle in hand. "The West Wing has taken water," he said. "Cecily's chamber as well. I've moved her to the Blue Room for the night. I suggest you do the same." "I'll help her," she said quickly. "She's already settled. It's you I'm concerned about." She blinked. "Concerned? I won't have you sleeping in a flooded room." Her lips curved faintly. "That's very gallant of you, Your Grace." Almost uncharacteristically so. His mouth twitched. "Don't mistake practicality for gallantry." "Then I thank you for your practicality," she said, gathering her shawl. "Where shall I go?" He hesitated. "There's an adjoining chamber beside the library. It's rarely used but dry. I'll show you." They walked in silence through dim corridors, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and smoke. When lightning flared through the windows, it illuminated his profile, hard, proud, and unexpectedly human. At the doorway, he paused. "This will suffice." She stepped inside. The room was small but warm, the fire crackling to life as if anticipating her. She turned back to him. "You're certain it's no trouble?" He gave a low laugh, the kind that sounded like it had been buried for years. "Trouble follows you, Lady Hale. I've learned to expect it." "I could say the same for you, Your Grace." Their eyes met. Lightning flashed again, and for one unguarded moment, the world outside vanished. Then the wind screamed, the candle flickered, and thunder cracked overhead. Without thinking, she stepped closer, her voice nearly lost in the storm. "Do you ever sleep?" He looked startled. "What? I see the light from your study most nights. I wondered if you ever rest." He exhaled slowly. "I try. The ghosts are louder in the dark." Katrina's voice softened. "Then perhaps you should stop trying to fight them alone." He stared at her, the sincerity in her eyes, the courage in her calm. Something inside him shifted, something he'd buried for too long. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "Everyone I let close pays for it." "I'm still here," she whispered, "and I've no intention of leaving." He closed the distance between them before reason could intervene. The firelight glowed on her face, and his hand lifted just once to touch a strand of her hair. "Damn you," he murmured almost to himself. "You should have left when I told you." "Perhaps," she breathed, "but then you wouldn't have anyone to keep you awake." He drew in a sharp breath, a sound caught between a laugh and a groan, and stepped back abruptly, as though the nearness had burned him. "Go to bed, Lady Hale," he said, his voice rough. "Before I forget my sense entirely." She smiled faintly, though her heart raced. "Good night, Your Grace." "Good night," he said, but he did not leave. He stood there a moment longer, watching her in the firelight before turning away and vanishing down the corridor. That night, as thunder rolled across the hills, both lay awake in rooms divided by only a wall, listening to the same storm, haunted by the same thought. He ordered her to leave, but what if she never did? Chapter 4. The General's Heart. For days afterward, the manor seemed to breathe differently, as though the walls themselves remembered what had been spoken within them. Rain washed the moors clean, wild flowers began to pierce the damp earth. Yet inside Ashbourne, something else was stirring, quiet but undeniable. The Duke of Ravensshire avoided the music room for 3 days. Katrina noticed. He dined late, worked late, and kept to his study, as though hiding behind paper and ink could silence the echo of that night. Her voice, her defiance, her closeness. He told himself that distance was wisdom, that one soft-spoken woman could not undo what years of war had made of him. He lied to himself often. He was practiced at it. Katrina spent her mornings with Cecily, walking the overgrown gardens that edged the manor. Spring sunlight broke through a veil of cloud, soft and uncertain. Birds returned to the hedgerows, testing their songs after the storm. "I cannot recall when last my brother laughed," Cecily confessed one afternoon as they paused by the stone fountain. "He was different once, before the war, before—" She hesitated, her hands worrying the edge of her shawl. "Before Eliza?" Katrina asked gently. Cecily's eyes widened. "You know of her?" "I heard a name only, nothing more." Cecily sighed. "They were betrothed. She was lovely, charming, admired by everyone, but she wanted more than love. She wanted rank, ease, safety. When word came that Tristan had been wounded and presumed dead, she married Lord Halston instead." Katrina's breath caught. "Halston, your cousin, the very one when Tristan returned alive but scarred and changed." "Well, you can imagine." Cecily shook her head. "He speaks little of it, but I've seen the way he looks toward the cliffs some evenings, as though a part of him is still out there, somewhere between the guns and the sea." Katrina looked toward the horizon, endless grey meeting endless green. "Some wounds do not close because we never allow them to." Cecily gave her a sad smile. "If anyone can remind him what living feels like, Lady Hale, I believe it might be you." Katrina turned away before her expression betrayed her. "I doubt he wishes to be reminded." That evening she found him in the stables. He was alone, sleeves rolled to his forearms, hands steady on the bridle of a restless black stallion. The animal reared slightly as thunder grumbled far away, but the Duke's voice, low and calm, soothed it at once. "You trust him," she said quietly from the doorway. He glanced over his shoulder, surprise flickering through his grey eyes. "Midnight is the only creature here who listens without argument." "Then he's rare indeed," she replied, stepping closer. "I'd not have guessed you a man for gentle words." "I'm not," he said, "but horses understand what people never do. Strength needn't mean cruelty." Katrina watched him stroke the animal's neck, his movements precise and sure. "You speak of them as if they were soldiers." In a sense they were. Loyal without question, brave without choice. He paused, jaw tightening. "Better companions than most men I knew." There was silence then, only the soft rustle of straw and the steady rhythm of the horse's breath. "You lost friends," she said finally. "All of them," he answered. "I led them to victory and to graves." Catriona's throat ached. "And you blame yourself?" He turned sharply, eyes flashing. "Wouldn't you?" She met his anger with quiet strength. "I would grieve them, but I would not mistake grief for guilt." He looked away first, exhaling as if her words cost him something. "You speak as though war is a matter of philosophy." "No," she said, "as though it's a matter of the heart." He studied her then, truly studied her, and something in his expression changed. The hard lines of command softened, replaced by something almost wondering. "You should fear me," he said. "I don't." "Why?" "Because I can see you." He stepped closer, the distance between them vanishing like mist. "And what is it you see?" "A man who carries too many ghosts," she whispered, "and one who still knows how to feel, even if he pretends otherwise." For a moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then he turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You should not say such things, because they're untrue. Because they make me forget myself." Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. "Perhaps forgetting is what you need." The stallion snorted softly, breaking the spell. The Duke stepped back, his composure slipping back into place like armor. "I'll not have you speaking with my cousin again," he said abruptly. Katrina blinked. "Halston, he means you harm. His debts are heavy, his intentions worse. If he returns, you'll come straight to me. Promise it." She hesitated. "You have my word?" "Good." His tone softened. "And thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what honesty sounds like." That night, she sat by the window in her chamber, the moon silvering the moor. Below, she saw a lone figure pacing the terrace, tall, dark, restless. He looked up once, and even across the distance, she felt it, that unspoken thread binding them. It frightened her how much she wished to go to him, to tell him he was not alone. But before she could move, a knock sounded at her door. "Lady Hale?" Cecily's anxious voice. "My brother's called for you. He says it's urgent." Katrina's heart quickened. "Now? At this hour?" "Yes. In his study. He asked for you by name." When she entered, the fire burned low. Papers lay scattered across the desk. He stood by the window, a letter crushed in his fist. "You sent for me, Your Grace?" He turned. The candlelight carved his features in bronze and shadow. "Yes, sit." She obeyed, uncertain. "Is something wrong?" "Halston," he said bitterly. "He's in London, spreading rumors about you, about me, claims I've taken you as my mistress." Her stomach dropped. "That's a lie." "I know." He crossed to the sideboard, poured a drink, and set it down untouched. But society won't, and my sister will suffer for it. Katrina swallowed hard. What will you do? He met her eyes. I intend to end it, but I need your help. My help? She echoed. What could I possibly do? He hesitated, then spoke slowly. Attend the Duke of Wexley's ball with me next week. Let them see us together, openly, properly. If I present you as my ward under my protection, it will silence Halston's filth. She stared at him. You would risk more gossip for my sake? He gave a grim smile. I risk it to protect my family, but yes, for your sake too. Katrina rose, heart pounding. And what would I owe you in return, your grace? His eyes darkened. Nothing I would ever take without your consent. Lightning flickered beyond the windows again, though the sky outside was clear. Then I'll go, she said softly. But you'll have to teach me how to be seen without belonging. He took a slow step toward her. And if the pretense feels too real, then perhaps, she whispered, neither of us will sleep again. He drew in a breath, sharp, uncertain, then reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was careful, as though afraid of what it might mean. You have a dangerous courage, Lady Hale. And you, she said, have a heart you pretend not to possess. He released her then, turning away before he did something reckless. Go, before I forget I'm still a gentleman. She curtsied, the ghost of a smile on her lips. Good night, your grace. When the door closed behind her, he pressed his palm to the desk where her hand had rested moments before. His pulse still thundered beneath the scars and the years. For the first time since the war, he realized his heart could still beat, and that frightened him more than any battlefield ever had. That night, the Duke of Ravenshire stood by the window long after the fire died, watching the candlelight flicker in her chamber across the courtyard. He ordered her to leave once. Now, he could not imagine this house or his life without her in it. Chapter 5. The Ruin of Pride. Carriages rolled along the crescent leading to Wexley Hall, wheels crunching on frost-glazed gravel. Gaslight shimmered against gilt columns and the silks of the arriving guests. Laughter and music floated through tall windows into the cold February air. Katrina had not seen such splendor since before her father's fall, before her name became a caution whispered in drawing rooms. And now she was here again, under the arm of the most feared man in England. The Duke of Ravenshire cut an imposing figure in his dark coat and silver waistcoat, the scars across his temple, faint under the glow of chandeliers, only made him look more dangerous, more real than the painted gentlemen around them. As they entered, a hush followed. Heads turned, fans paused mid-air. Do not falter, he murmured low beside her. They will scent fear like wolves. She lifted her chin, voice steady. Then they shall go hungry tonight. A shadow of a smile touched his lips. That's my brave girl. She shouldn't have thrilled at the words, but she did. And when his hand brushed hers, just a fraction too long for propriety, her heart tripped over itself. Inside, the ballroom blazed with color and sound. The Duke's presence was a weapon. Every step, every glance calculated. Yet Katrina knew the man behind it, the one who soothed frightened horses and read poetry when he thought no one watched. Lady Hale, drawled a familiar voice from the crowd. How unexpected. She froze. Lord Halston stood before them, smiling the smile of a man who had never earned a day's peace. His cravat was perfect, his expression poisonous. "Halston," said the Duke evenly. "I should have guessed rats thrive in gilded halls. Still so charming, cousin." Halston bowed mockingly to Katrina. "And you, my lady? I hardly recognized you. It seems the Duke's protection suits you very well." Ravenshire's hand tightened around hers. "Say another word, and I'll have you removed." "Oh, I mean no insult," Halston said smoothly. "It's simply admirable how devoted you are to your companion." The word dripped venom. Gasps rippled nearby. Katrina felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she did not look away. "I am here as the Duke's guest," she said clearly, "and I have nothing to be ashamed of." Halston's smile thinned. "No? Then tell me, when he tires of this little charity, what title shall you take? Mistress of Ravenshire? Or perhaps just another casualty of his honor?" Ravenshire moved before anyone saw him, one fist at Halston's collar, dragging him half an inch off the ground. "You will not speak her name again," the Duke said in a voice that silenced the music itself. "Leave before I forget we share blood." Halston's smirk faltered. He straightened his coat and melted into the crowd, but the damage was done. Whispers trailed in his wake like smoke. Katrina exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't have done that. I should have killed him years ago," he muttered. "You've only proven his rumors true," she said quietly. He turned to her, pain flashing in his grey eyes. "Do you care what they think of you?" "I care what they think of you," she whispered. "And of Cecily. You said this was to protect her reputation, but what will they say now?" He said nothing. His hand fell from hers. They danced once that night, a waltz they both pretended to enjoy. The music was slow, elegant, deceptive. "You are trembling," he said softly. "Not from fear," she replied. His gaze caught hers, unguarded. "Then from what? From wanting something I have no right to want?" He drew her closer. "And what is that?" "Peace," she said, breathless. "For you, for me, for once." His lips parted, as if to confess something dangerous, but before he could speak, a familiar voice intruded. "Your Grace," purred Lady Eliza Halston, golden hair gleaming, smile sharp as a blade. "I did not expect to see you again." Katrina stiffened. "Eliza," he said curtly. "My husband sends his regards," she said sweetly, eyes darting to Katrina. "And who is this charming creature?" "Ah, of course, your ward." The word made Katrina flinch. Ravenshire's tone turned glacial. "Lady Hale is under my protection." "Protection," Eliza repeated softly. "Such a generous word. Tell me, Your Grace, does she know what that means for you?" Katrina's throat tightened. "What is she talking about?" Eliza smiled, eyes glittering with cruelty. "Only that the Duke has a talent for guardianship. I should know. I was once under it myself. It was a lie, but a clever one, whispered with just enough truth to wound." Ravenshire's jaw set. Enough. But the whispers had already begun, spreading like wildfire across the ballroom. Faces turned, fans fluttered. Katrina felt her stomach twist. "Is it true?" she asked, voice trembling. "Were you once?" "No," he said sharply, "not as she implies." "But you cared for her." "I was a fool," he admitted. "And you must trust me." She drew back. "Trust? You've given me orders, bargains, secrets, but never truth." Before he could answer, Lord Halston reappeared, laughing too loudly. "There he is, the valiant Duke, protector of lost women. Shall I drink to your collection, cousin? Ravenshaw struck him. The sound cracked across the hall like gunfire. Holston hit the floor, lip bleeding, but his grin only widened. Ah, and there it is. The general returns. Guards stepped forward, the host stammering protests. Katrina caught the Duke's arm. Tristan, stop. He turned on her, raw fury and shame in his eyes. Don't, not now. You're proving them right, she pleaded. And what would you have me do? Let him slander you in front of half of London? Yes, she said softly, if it means you could keep your soul. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Two proud, broken people standing on the edge of ruin. Then he tore his arm free. Go home, Catriona, she flinched. What? Back to the manor, tonight? You can't mean that. I said go. His voice was cold again. The general's voice, not the man she knew. I'll not have my life become another scandal. You've done enough. Her heart cracked in silence. So you believe them? He hesitated, the faintest flicker of doubt, then looked away. Leave before I make this worse. Katrina stepped back, her eyes glistening, though she would not let them fall. As you wish, Your Grace. She turned and walked away as the crowd parted. The music resumed, hollow and distant. Ravenshaw stood motionless amid the stairs, the taste of blood and regret bitter in his mouth. The carriage ride back to Ashbourne was long, silent, and endless. Cecily tried to speak, but Katrina said only, "He ordered me to leave, and I shall obey him." When they reached the manor, she packed her few belongings by candlelight. The gown from the ball lay across the bed, shimmering mockingly. She paused once at the window, the same window where she'd seen him pacing beneath the moon, and whispered, "I stayed once because you needed me. I leave now because you don't believe you ever did." And then she was gone. 3 days later, Ravenshaw returned to an empty house. Her chamber stood bare, save for a single folded note on the dressing table. He unfolded it with unsteady hands. "You once told me horses understand what people never do. That strength needn't mean cruelty. I hope one day you'll remember that truth for yourself. I did not come to save you, Tristan, only to remind you that you were never beyond saving." He stood for a long time, reading the words again and again. Then he sank into her empty chair, pressing the note to his chest as though he could will her voice back into the room. For the first time in years, the Duke of Ravenshaw felt utterly defeated, not by war, not by enemies, but by his own pride. And that, he realized too late, was the cruelest battle of all. That night, no one saw him weep. But the next morning, the servants found him still seated in her room, the letter open in his hand, and the fire burned to ash. Chapter 6. The letter he never sent. It came quietly, without thunder or fanfare, only a thin frost that crept along the windows and the faint sigh of wind through the corridors. The manor stood like a ghost of itself, vast and silent, haunted not by spirits but by memory. Lady Katrina Hale had been gone for 3 months. In that time, the Duke of Ravenshaw had learned the true shape of silence, how it could fill rooms, seep through walls, and settle on one's heart until even breathing felt like penance. He had not slept, not properly. The bed was too wide, too cold, too honest. Some nights he imagined he heard her voice in the corridor, soft, steady, unafraid, and he would rise, half mad, calling her name into emptiness. No one answered. In London, the gossip had burned bright and then died. Society moved on, as it always did, devouring one scandal to feed the next. But the Duke had not. His heart remained where he had left it, on that ballroom floor, in the eyes of a woman who had refused to weep until she was out of his sight. Cecily watched him with growing fear. He ate little, spoke less. Letters from Parliament went unanswered. Invitations returned unopened. He rode at dawn through the frozen moors, heedless of the weather, returning only when his horse was near collapse. One evening, as snow began to fall, she found him in Katrina's old chamber. "Tristan," she said softly, "you cannot keep torturing yourself." He didn't turn. "I told her to leave." "Yes," Cecily said gently, and she obeyed. "What did you expect her to do? Beg to stay?" He closed his eyes. "I expected her to hate me." "She doesn't," Cecily whispered. "That's what haunts you, isn't it?" He said nothing, but his hand trembled slightly as it brushed over the edge of the dressing table, the same place he had found Katrina's letter months ago. "You loved her," Cecily said simply. "Everyone saw it, even if you didn't." "I cannot love," he said flatly. "Not after what I've done. Not after." "After Eliza," Cecily interrupted. "After the war. You've let ghosts dictate the life you're still living." He turned sharply. "You know nothing of ghosts. I know enough to see one when it's standing in front of me." Her voice wavered but did not break. "You think you're punishing yourself for the men you lost, for the woman who betrayed you. But what you're really doing, Tristan, is punishing anyone who dares to love you despite it." Her words struck him like a blade. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, "Leave me." She hesitated, eyes glistening. "You'll drive away everyone, brother, until there's nothing left but the echo of your own pride." When she was gone, he sank into the chair by the fire. Snow fell harder outside, white and endless. He poured a glass of whiskey, but did not drink it. Instead, he stared into the flames until the world blurred. Later that night, unable to rest, he went to the library. The fire there had long gone cold, the air heavy with dust and old smoke. He opened drawers, pulled books from shelves, searching for something he could not name. Perhaps he hoped to find a reason, or perhaps forgiveness. He found a letter instead. It was hidden behind a stack of old dispatches from the war. Yellowed pages bound in ribbon. The envelope bore his name, the seal unbroken. His heart faltered as he recognized the handwriting. Eliza. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, unable to breathe. Then, with hands that were no longer steady, he broke the seal. The letter was dated the day before her wedding to Lord Halston. "My dearest Tristan, by the time you read this, I shall be gone. They say you are dead, but I cannot believe it, and yet I am not brave enough to wait. My father insists upon this marriage, and I have neither fortune nor power to refuse him. I tell myself you would understand, though I know that is a lie. Forgive me if you can. You deserve better than a coward's love." "Eliza," he stared at the words until they blurred. Then he laughed, a hollow, broken sound. All these years, he had built his rage on a lie. She had not betrayed him for wealth or vanity, but out of fear, out of weakness, yes, but not malice. And he had punished every soul since for her choice. He pressed a trembling hand to his face. "God forgive me," he whispered. "I've been fighting ghosts while the living suffered." And in that moment he saw Katrina's face, clear as day, the courage in her eyes, the defiance, the compassion that had refused to break even under his cruelty. He realized with sickening clarity that he had become the very thing he despised, a man who mistook pride for armor and drove away the only light left to him. 2 days later, Cecily found him feverish in his bed. The doctor was called. Pneumonia, they said. Exposure from too many rides in the snow, too little rest. The great Duke of Ravenshire, felled not by battle, but by grief. For a week he drifted between waking and nightmare. Sometimes he called out commands, reliving the war. Sometimes he whispered her name, Catriona, over and over, as though the syllables were a prayer. One night, as the fever broke, he awoke to find Cecily sitting by his side. "You should rest," she said softly. His voice was raw. "I need to find her." "You can't even stand." "I must." He pushed himself upright, pain flaring through his chest. "If I die without seeing her again, I'll never forgive myself." Cecily hesitated. She went north, to her aunt's cottage near Whitby. "That's all I know." He managed a faint, weary smile. "Then north it is." The journey took 2 days. He left before dawn, cloak heavy around his shoulders, a small escort behind him. The winter wind cut sharp as knives, but he did not falter. Each mile felt like a confession, every breath a plea. By the time the cliffs of Whitby came into view, the sky was a pale wash of grey and rose. Seagulls wheeled above the waves, their cries sharp and lonely. He found the cottage easily. A small stone dwelling near the sea, smoke curling from the chimney. His heart pounded as he dismounted. For a long moment, he stood at the door, uncertain. Then he knocked. It opened slowly. Katrina stood there, wrapped in a simple shawl, her hair looser than he remembered. For a heartbeat, she simply stared, as though unsure if he were real or some ghost conjured by longing. "Your Grace," she breathed at last. He removed his hat, voice rough. "Don't call me that. Why have you come?" "To say what I should have said months ago." He stepped closer, eyes dark with exhaustion and something deeper. "I was wrong, Catriona, about everything." She said nothing, but her hands trembled at her sides. "I thought pride could protect me," he continued. "That shutting out the world would keep me safe. But it only made me a coward, the very thing I once despised. You saw through it. You saw me, and I repaid that with cruelty." Her eyes glistened, but she did not look away. "Why now?" "Because I found a letter," he said quietly. "The one Eliza left. She didn't betray me for wealth, only for fear. And I realized I've been punishing the wrong people ever since, especially you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Do you expect forgiveness?" "No," his voice broke, "only the chance to ask for it." She looked at him for a long time, the wind from the sea carrying silence between them. "You ordered me to leave," she whispered. "I did, and I've thought of you every day since. I told myself it was foolish, that love born of pity could never survive. But it wasn't pity, Tristan." He stepped closer, the faintest tremor in his voice. "Then what was it?" "Hope," she said simply. "For you, for the man you still are beneath the ruin." He reached out then, hesitating as his fingers hovered near her face. "May I?" She nodded. He touched her cheek, lightly, reverently, as though afraid she might vanish. "I couldn't sleep without you," he whispered. "I've tried. God knows I've tried." Her eyes closed, tears slipping past her lashes. "Then stop trying." He drew her into his arms. The sea roared below, wild and endless, but the world itself seemed to still. For the first time in years, he felt warmth, that was not born of fire but of peace. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft against her hair. "Will you come home?" She smiled faintly. "Home is wherever you remember how to love again." That evening, they sat by the hearth in her small cottage, the light flickering across their faces. She poured him tea, scolded him for riding in the cold, and for the first time in months, he laughed, not a bitter sound, a real one. And later, when the fire burned low and his head rested against her shoulder, he whispered the words that had lived unsent in his heart. "If I could write only one letter more, it would say this: you are my peace after war, my reason after ruin, my heart after all." Outside, the wind shifted. Snow began to fall again, soft, forgiving, endless, and inside the Duke of Ravenshire slept at last, not alone, not haunted, but home. Chapter 7. The morning he slept again. The first light of spring crept through the curtains of the cottage, spilling gold across the wooden floorboards. The sea below was calm, a silver mirror stretching into forever. Gulls wheeled lazily in the pale sky, their cries distant and soft. Inside, the hearth had burned low. A teapot sat half forgotten on the table, steam rising in gentle spirals. On the couch before the fire lay the Duke of Ravenshire, his coat folded over him like a blanket, the faint trace of sleep softening his proud features. Lady Katrina Hale watched him in silence. He looked younger in rest, years falling from his face with each steady breath. The lines of command, of sorrow, of guilt, all smoothed away until only the man remained, the one who had laughed once before the world demanded too much of him. She did not wake him, not yet. For the first time since they met, he slept without fear, and she could finally breathe without pain. When he stirred, the sunlight had climbed higher. His hand reached instinctively toward the empty air beside him, then stilled as his eyes opened to find her watching. "Good morning," she said softly. He blinked, momentarily disoriented, then gave a faint, self-conscious smile. "I haven't slept like that in years." "I know," she said. "You kept me awake for half the night with your restlessness." He sat up slowly, wincing as his stiff shoulder protested. "A soldier's body was never made for peace." She poured him tea. "Then you'll have to learn." He took the cup from her hands, their fingers brushing briefly. "You should know, Lady Hale, I am a poor student." "I am a patient teacher," she replied. He smiled at that, a quiet, genuine thing that reached his eyes. "You always were." After breakfast, he stepped outside while she tidied the cottage. The cold wind off the North Sea bit through his coat, but he didn't mind. He stood at the edge of the cliff, watching the tide shift and the gulls trace their endless circles overhead. When Katrina joined him, she brought his gloves and her courage. "I thought you might ride away again," she said softly. "I almost did," he admitted. "Not because I wished to, only because running feels easier than rebuilding. And yet you stayed." He looked at her then, truly looked, as if memorizing every detail. The wind in her hair, the color of her eyes, the faint curve of defiance in her chin. "Because you stayed once, when I gave you every reason not to." She smiled faintly. "It was never about reason." He took her hands in his, drawing her closer. "Catriona, if you can forgive me, I already did, she said, long before you asked. He bowed his head, pressing her hands to his lips. Then I'll spend whatever years are left proving myself worthy of that mercy. You already have, she whispered. A few days later, they returned to Ravenshire. The carriage rolled through the familiar gates as the first buds of spring dotted the hedgerows. The servants, seeing their master and Lady Hale together again, whispered in relief and wonder. Cecily ran down the steps, tears shining in her eyes. "You found her!" she cried. "No," said the Duke, glancing at Katrina with a soft smile. "She found me." Cecily embraced them both. "Then perhaps now this house can breathe again." That evening, the manor filled with warmth for the first time in years. Fires were lit in every hearth. Laughter echoed faintly through the corridors, and music, hesitant but sweet, drifted from the drawing room. Later, when the house had quieted, Katrina wandered into the library. She paused by the desk where the old letter still lay, Eliza's words now folded beside a newer parchment, freshly written. She recognized the handwriting. "My dearest Katrina, there were 1,000 things I should have said before pride stole them from me. I once thought the battlefield taught me courage, but it was you who showed me what bravery truly meant. To love without armor, to stay when commanded, to flee. If ever I forget this peace, remind me of this morning. Remind me that once I slept again because you were near. Tristan." She folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her heart. Behind her, the door creaked. Tristan stood in the doorway, his expression soft, almost shy. "You weren't meant to find that yet," he said. "I think it found me," she replied. He stepped closer, stopping only when he was near enough to touch her. "I wrote it the morning I woke beside you. I wanted you to have proof." "Of what?" "That even soldiers learn to rest," he said simply. She smiled through the shimmer in her eyes. "And what now, Your Grace?" He took her face gently between his hands. "Now, my lady, I start over, not as a general, not as a duke, but as a man who has finally learned how to love." Her voice trembled. "And how does one love after so much loss?" "Completely," he whispered, "without orders, without fear." And then he kissed her, softly at first, as if unsure whether the world would allow such peace. But when she melted against him, the last of his restraint broke, and the man who had once commanded armies finally surrendered, not to battle, but to love. That night, Ravenshire was quiet again, but not with sorrow. From the open window of his chamber, the moors stretched silver beneath the moonlight. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, of earth, of renewal. In the bed where he had once lain awake for endless nights, the Duke now slept soundly, her hand resting in his. Katrina watched him for a long while, her heart full. Once he had ordered her to leave. Now he could not sleep without her, and in that still, perfect dawn, she knew neither of them ever would again. The bells of Ravenshire rang bright that spring morning. The estate, once quiet and grey, now burst with colour, gardens in bloom, laughter echoing down the halls. The Duke and Duchess of Ravenshire stood beneath the old oak where wild flowers grew, their hands entwined. A gentle breeze stirred her veil as he leaned close. "Do you remember," he murmured, "the first time I ordered you to leave?" Katrina laughed softly. "I remember refusing, and thank God you did," he said, kissing her hand. In the distance, Cecily waved to them from the terrace, and the servants cheered as the couple turned toward the house. The war was over, the ghosts were gone, and for the first time in forever, Ashbourne Manor was truly alive.